Hi and welcome to Stella's Meza. I know it's been a while since I've come up to you live with a video, but I'm very happy to be here today and I want to show you how to make an apple pie today. Alright, now cold season's here and apples are everywhere, so I'm going to come up with a couple recipes to show you how you can use these apples, and I'll include them in the upcoming videos. But today it's apple pie and I'll take you over to the ingredients so we can get started. Alright, now to make an apple pie you will need a crust. What I'm going to be showing you how to make today is a butter crust. Now you can use butter flavored shortening like Crisco to make this pie crust, but I prefer butter because of the rich taste. And over here I have some all-purpose flour. Now what I like to do is I like to chill my bowl with the flour in the refrigerator prior to starting to make the crust. So this bowl has been chilled, so the flour is a little bit cold. You want everything nice and cold, okay? That way when you put the butter in, it doesn't melt as fast. And you'll also need some sweet cream butter. And what I went ahead and did is I went ahead and cubed it, and I cut it up into little cubes and put it in the fridge, so it's also very cold. And you'll also need some ice water, just a few tablespoonfuls. You'll need some salt. And then what I like to do is to put some vinegar, just distilled white vinegar, into my pie crust. Now the reason I do that is because flour has a protein in it called gluten. Now gluten is what gives flour that stretchy texture, like when you start pouring liquids into it. So what this does, what the vinegar does, is that it cuts those strands of gluten and helps make the pie crust flaky. Okay, so it's not all stretchy. It'll cut it up. When you break into the crust, you're going to see it's going to be flaky. And also another thing that makes the pie crust flaky is the butter. That's why we cube it this way. You don't want to, when you're incorporating into the flour, you do not want to make it really fine or make it disappear into the flour, because there's little flecks of butter that you leave in there. When it's baking, when the pie is baking, the moisture will evaporate from the butter and then it'll escape through the crust, and that's also going to make your pie crust flaky. So other things you'll need, of course, are the apples. Now today I'll be using Honeycrisp apples, and I'll also be using Grandma Smith apples. These are very good because they have a lot of pectin, so they don't like dissolve into your apple pie. You want to use any kind of apple that has some crunch to it, but this definitely has to be in there, Grandma Smith apples, okay? Just to not use a red delicious, because they'll turn your apple pie into mush. You can also use Gala apples, Brabant apples, whatever kind of crispy apples you can find, you can use those in there, but make sure you have a good amount of Grandma Smith apples. Alright, and we'll also need some vanilla, pure vanilla extract. In here I have fresh nutmeg that I'm going to grate into my filling, which will have the apples in there. Now you can use powdered nutmeg, but there's something about the taste of fresh nutmeg that just takes whatever it is you're cooking to the next level. And I also add my secret ingredient, which is cardamom. Okay, I know it's not a typical spice that is used in apple pie, but it just gives it that nice exotic little twist, right? And of course cinnamon, which is a star spice used in this a pie. Also you'll need some sugar, okay? Now you'll also need a cling foil and a pastry brush. You'll need some measuring spoons, and this is what I use to cut the butter into the flour. It's a pastry cutter. You can either use this, if you don't have one, you can use a fork, just a tiny little fork. You mush the butter into the flour with that, or old school way, you can use two knives, just kind of kung fu motion to cut the butter into the flour. All right, so we're going to start making the pie crust. Over here I'll put all the measurements, all ingredients in my blog as usual. Please visit www.stellasmeza.blogspot.com. all right, so now I'm going to put the salt into the flour. On my blog I'm going to put the recipe for a single crust pie, okay, just for the bottom, if you're making whatever kind of pie you're making. But this apple pie has a bottom crust, it has a top crust, so I've doubled the measurements that you'll see on my blog. Okay, that's why it looks like a lot, but really I've just doubled it. Okay, so I'm not sure if you want to use it to make any, like a double crusted pie or just a single crusted pie. Depending on whatever it is you're making, go ahead and double the ingredients, okay? Alright, I'm going to incorporate that salt into that flour. And then I'm going to start cutting the butter into the flour. As you can see, I just cubed it. See, little cubes. So I'm going to put that in there, and then I'm going to start cutting it in. Kind of breaking it up into little cubes that kind of touch together because of the fat in there, but break it in there. Alright, now this is a basic pie crust that I use to make my pies. And it has lots of uses, okay? In the future, when I make pies, I'm going to be using this crust to make whatever pie. So if I refer to this crust, please make sure to come and visit this post for apple pie to find the crust recipe in there. Alright, almost done breaking these up. They're very cold, and that's what you want. You don't want to handle the butter too much because you don't want it to melt. Remember, you want it to have specks of butter in the pastry, in the crust. That way, when you're baking it, they evaporate, and that will help make your crust flaky. So you don't want them to be melty or at room temperature at all. You want them to be nice and cold. So you see what I'm doing? I'm just using this to kind of break that in there. And you want the crumb for the crust to be like coarse textured, like not bigger than the size of peas, okay? You want to keep doing this and breaking it down. And I'm using a fork to get that butter off of there. You just keep breaking it. Let me show you what you can do with a fork. If you don't have a pastry cutter, you just take your fork and you press it in there. Actually, this works very well. You press it in there. Or the knife method. I hope I'm not blocking, so you can see what I'm doing. The knife method, you take 2 knives and you see what I'm doing? You work the butter into the flour, breaking it up as you do this, as you cut this. So I'm going to keep cutting the butter into the flour, and then I'll come back to show you what texture you should have before you put your flour together to finally make a disc that you use later for your pie crust. So I'll be right back. Alright, we're back, and I've already cut the butter into the flour, but I had not added the vinegar or the ice water. I want to show you something. Over here are my slices of apple. I know they look a little on the brown side. Alright, and that's because I pre-sliced them, being that I was being conscious of time. I didn't want to start doing that on camera. But it's not going to affect the taste, trust me. I did put some lemon juice on there to help so they do not brown or not too much. So I want to start putting the ingredients into this that are going to kind of pull the juices out of the apples, okay? Because you do not want a soggy crust. Apples have a lot of juice in them. If you put the sugar and the spices in there, it's going to pull out the moisture from the apples. So we want to try and pull out as much moisture as we can from the apples so that we can use the juices. Once I put the sugar and spices in there, use those juices to reduce. We're going to reduce those juices on the stove, and then we're going to pour them back up over the apples before we put them into the pie crust. So over here I have some sugar. Just regular all-purpose sugar that I'm going to sprinkle up over the apples. Now remember, the crust does not have sugar, so I know this looks like a lot of sugar, but remember that the crust does not have any sugar. So I'm going to sprinkle the cinnamon up over the apples. Alright, and some of that cardamom. Now remember not to be heavy-handed with cardamom, because if you put too much on there, it's going to leave a soapy taste, whatever it is you're making. So I never use more than half a teaspoon at any one point in any recipe. Alright, now this is nutmeg. This is fresh nutmeg. I'm just going to grate just a little bit because it has a strong flavor. Just around a 1/4 teaspoon of it, and I promise I'm going to save up and buy what do you call it? Microplane zesters. I'm going to do that because it makes easy work of doing that, of grating little things. Alright, and to that I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla. I know a lot of people do not do this, but this is something I like to add in my apple pie, just for that added flavor. I'm going to add about a teaspoonful of it. Maybe a little bit over that. Wouldn't hurt anything. Okay, and remember to use pure vanilla extract because that has the best flavor. Okay? I'm not going to mess up the flavors of your whatever it is you're making. So I'm just going to use spatula. You can use your hands, okay, but I'm going to go back to the pie crust and I don't feel like stop and wash my hands. So I'm going to use 2 rubber spatulas and I'm just going to toss those apples in those spices, okay? And I'm using spatulas because they're not hard, they won't break up the slices of apple. You want to cut your apples thinly. Now you can use, I use what do you call that thing, baby? Mandolin slicer to get this size apples, or you can use a paring knife, a sharp paring knife, but be very careful, especially when you're using your mandolin slicer, because I almost took a finger off. So I'm just tossing them in there. It smells so good and it's not even cooked, my goodness. So what's going to happen is that sugar that we added in here is going to pull out the juices from the apples. Alright, and then we're going to cover it up as we wait, after we finish making our crust, as we wait for it to chill in the refrigerator. We're going to put them in the crust in the refrigerator for 30 minutes. As we wait for it to chill, the juice is just going to be pulled out of the apples, and then we're going to use that. We're going to use the juices to reduce and have some kind of caramel thing going on that we're going to pour up over the apples to make it so much more delicious than the natural juices that they have in there. Okay, just want to make sure everything is nicely coated. And I think we're good. Okay, I'm just going to cover this back up. And you want to use a container, a mixing bowl that has a cover on it. I'm going to cover that back up. I'm going to set it aside, and then we're going to keep working on our pie crust. Okay, so here it is. If you can look in here, you will see that the butter has been broken up into small pieces. Okay, try and get it as small as you can. I know there's those who don't have patience. Sometimes I'm one of those, but try and be patient and make sure that the pieces are smaller than when you put them into the flour. So I'm going to add the water, a tablespoon at a time, and you want to don't dump it all in there. I'm going to mix first of all the vinegar into the water, okay, and then I'm going to give it a nice stir. And you want ice water because you want to keep those little flakes of butter still solid in the flour. So I'm going to add a little bit at a time, and then I'm going to keep cutting the butter into the flour until the texture of the flour, like it pulls away from the sides of the bowl. Like you can, I'm going to put it on this silicone mat that I have set on the table here, and then we're going to pull it together into the crust, into a disc, okay? So I'm going to add a little at a time, just say 2 teaspoonfuls at a time, tablespoonfuls, I'm sorry, at a time. And you see me working that in there. As you add, you use your fork or your pastry cutter or your knives to work the dough. And make sure you don't use your hands to do this. And the reason why you do not want to melt that butter, because that butter is what will give your pie crust that nice flaky texture. Okay? Just a little bit of time. Try not to put the ice in there. And then once it starts coming together, I'm going to dump it out onto the silicone mat that I have here. And I'm going to knead it for a little bit, just real quick, because you don't want the butter to melt. And then I'm going to form into 2 discs. This, again, I'm making here double recipe for the pie crust that I will put in my blog. So to find just a single recipe, go to my blog. It's www.stellasmezza.blogspot.com. If you have whatever pie you're making, if it has 2 crusts, just double that recipe that's on my blog. Okay? A little bit more, just until it's, if you squeeze it between your hands, it comes together. Let's see. It's starting to come together, see that? We're going to test and see if it's at the stage where you can form a ball. So what you want to do is take a handful and squeeze it. See that? It's coming together. It's crumbling, so we're not there yet, but as soon as it comes together, when you squeeze in your hand, then it's ready to dump out onto a lightly floured surface. So you can work it a little before you divide it and put it into the refrigerator. Alright, and I've seen many variations of pie crust. I've seen where people use like cooking oil as opposed to fat or butter, and then I've seen people use lard, and that's the old-fashioned way. And then I've also seen people add things like what do you call vodka into the crust, and the purpose for that, they say, is just whatever it is the reason we're using the vinegar, same thing, to cut those strands of gluten. That way your dough is flaky as opposed to stretchy. Okay, so I think we're almost there. Let me try and see what we're working with here. Scoop that off. See that? I think we're good. Okay, so I'm gonna add, just for precaution, one more. You don't want it to be too wet and sticky. Actually, have a teaspoon. I'll just put a teaspoon on it. And then I'm going to keep working this out, and then I'm going to come back and show you what we do when we put it on our workstation here. Okay, so I'll be right back. Now I went ahead and put that dough that we're working on in the bowl together and dumped it out on my silicone mat here. You can just put it on any flat surface. So if you come down here, I'll show you what I did. I just patted the dough together. You don't want to work the dough too much, as in working, I mean touching with your hands too much, because what's going to happen is that butter will melt. So I just did it like very lightly, and this is the result. I went ahead and just patted it together, and I have the dough here ready, and I made it into a disc kind of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this right here. You can use a table knife to cut it in half, because this will be for the top crust, this will be for the bottom crust, and you want to try and get it into equal portions, as equal as you can. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of make this into a disc. Now this will help. The reason I'm doing this is it'll help once you're ready to roll your dough out. It'll help it easier for you to make it into a circle. Okay, so over here I have some cling foil that's sticking to my to my silicone mat, and I'm just gonna wrap this up, wrap it nicely, that way there's no air getting in there. I'm gonna wrap it up, and then I'm gonna store it in the fridge. You can continue like trying to make it into a disc while it's wrapped, that's fine. So this dough as it is can keep in the freezer for up to 3 months. So you can always have ready pie crust in case you get company, or you just want something special for your family. As a dessert, you can whip up some filling and then just use this to make your pie. However, if you put it in the freezer in that amount of time, 3 months tops, it'll keep good. You if you want to use it the following day, say if you make it tonight and you put it in the freezer, you want to use it tomorrow or the day after to make pie for your family, what you can do is you can put it in the refrigerator, okay, 24 hours prior to baking whatever it is you're looking to make, if it's been in the freezer. So let it thaw in the refrigerator for 24 hours. So I'm just going to wrap these two up, and I'm going to put them in the refrigerator for 30 minutes. All right, let that butter get nice and hard again, and then we're going to come back to put our pie together. So I'll see you back in a little bit. Welcome back. It's been 30 minutes and our dough has been chilling in the refrigerator. So I made two parts, like two of the same, and I'm just going to do one at a time. That way it doesn't get soft, the butter does not melt. We don't want it to be at room temperature. So this is still cold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unwrap it from the cling foil, and I've lightly floured my silicone mat here. I'm just going to put it on there, and I'm going to try and like seal those cracks, and you want to start rolling it out. But what I do is I don't roll from the ends back and forth, because that's going to fray the edges, like make them crack open. So I just kind of mush it up first, and I turn it around. See, this is what I'm talking about, I'm trying to avoid that. But as we roll it out, we can fix it. We'll just pinch it together. So I start from the center, go out, quarter ton, center out, quarter ton. Alright, and we're going to keep doing this. Let me keep doing this and come back and show you what it should look like. You try and roll it out to about 1/8 of an inch in thickness, not too thick because it's going to start cracking as you transfer it into your pie plate. Now you'll also need a pie plate. This is a 9-inch glass pie plate. You can use the ceramic ones, those are good as well. And you'll also need to, once we put the dough in the plate and we put the filling in, which in this case is apples, and then we put the top crust over it. We are going to, after we put everything together, we are going to need to wrap the edges or the outside of the crust. That way they don't brown too quickly. Now what I have here is a pie shield, right? And I do sell this on my Amazon store, so go check it out. And I found that protects the crust perfectly, okay? It doesn't get too brown, the edges of the pie crust. Or if you don't have that, you can use aluminum foil. Just kind of coil it gently around the edges, and stop using that because it breaks. I find it breaks the crust. It does a job, but sometimes it'll break the crust. And I'm going to show you something real quick. Remember the apples, the filling that we had? I put the lemon juice, I put the spices in there, and I forgot to mention, you might want to put, here I have some tapioca starch, which is similar to cornstarch. You can use cornstarch, or in other parts of the world it's called corn flour. Now the purpose of this is to thicken the sauces that will go, you know, the juices that come from the apples. Once you put the sugar and it pulls out the juice, you want to thicken it, and this does that. You don't want it runny inside your pie crust because nobody wants a soggy bottom, and I mean bottom crust. So you add this in there. What I did is I went ahead and put the apples in a colander over a bowl. That way the juices that drip from the apples get caught in the bowl, and then I transfer that mixture into a medium pan. And I went ahead and put it on medium heat just to create this nice thick, you see that? It's very viscous. Nice thick kind of caramel thing. This is just the juices of the apples and the spices that we put in there. And once we put the bottom crust and we put the apples on top of the crust, we're going to drizzle this up over there. We're going to dot it with butter, and then we're going to put the top crust over it, and then we're going to bake it up. And I have my oven preheated to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember, for all the metric measurements, if you want to do that, the Celsius, go check out my blog. There's chart I have on there that tells you the conversion, that converts the Fahrenheit to Celsius. So I'm going to roll this out. I'm going to come back and show you what the next step is. So don't forget to come back. Remember, don't forget to put your tapioca starch or your cornstarch in your apples, okay? You don't want it to be runny. So I'll be right back. All right, guys, we're back. I went ahead and rolled out the bottom crust of our pie, and I want to show you what it should look like. If you come down here, you'll see it's about 1/8 of an inch in thickness. See that? You don't want it too thick. And what you want to do is, if there's excess flour on your pie crust, you just want to brush that off, okay? And also what I did is, what I do to pry it from the work surface, if you don't have enough flour on the work surface, sometimes it will stick. It tends to stick. So what I do is I take just a thin spatula, and I just go and work around the edges to loosen it off. That way when I put it on my rolling pin to drape it off of my pie pan, nothing sticks. And now I'm going to start draping it over the pie pan because I've already loosened it, so it's going to be nice and easy. See, lightly drape it over your rolling pin, and it's heavy. So I'm going to take my pie plate, okay, and you want to roll out your dough, that way, your pie crust, that way the dough is bigger than the pie plate that you're using. And you don't want to just force it down. So what I do is I lift the edges and I gently let it fall in. You want to drape it, okay? And I use a little bit of pressure from my hands to let it fall in there. See what I'm doing? And I rotate. That way the corners stick to the dough, okay? The dough sticks to the corners or the edges of the inside of the pie plate. Okay, and once I'm sure it's nicely secured, I kind of pat down gently. See what I've done there? And there's going to be this excess over here. So what I'm going to do is I have a cookie cutter here, like the shape of a maple leaf. And I'm going to use this, any excess dough left, I'm going to cut out decorated pieces that I'm going to stick on top of the pan. You'll see what I mean. So what I do is I take a pair of kitchen knife, a pair of kitchen scissors, and I just cut around. Okay, and you want to leave an overhang, at least half an inch of an overhang. Overhang, I mean whatever's hanging over the edge of the pie plate. And you kind of want to work fast. You don't want your dough to get soft on you. And I'm being careful not to cut off too much because I want to leave some for crimping. Now what crimping is putting a final decorative touch to whatever pie crust you have left, the edges of it. That way it's pretty for presentation, and also that's a way of keeping whatever you're cooking, the filling in the pie, okay? Just securing it in place. So you see what I'm doing there? Okay, I'm going to use these pieces. I'm going to set those to the side, and I'm going to use them. Now you don't want to like cut your dough too close to the edge, to this edge. You don't want to cut it too close, because what happens as you bake it, the crust will shrink, so it'll fall in and it'll look puny and not pretty at all. I like my food pretty, so I'm very careful to not to cut too far out. So this is what I'm going to do. This is a pie filling, and we've drained most of the juices out. This is just the apples and the spices we put in there and the tapioca starch. I'm just going to pile them in there using a spoon. Alright, smells so good, guys. Ooh, can't wait for it to bake. The best part I find about baking an apple pie is the smell, the aroma that comes out of the oven. Fills the whole house. Just feels festive for whatever reason. Now, don't feel limited to use this recipe only for the colder months like fall or winter. You can bake apple pie any time of the year. Pretty much apples, at least where my side of town, you can find them at the grocery stores throughout the year. Okay, and all varieties of them, not just one particular kind. And remember, again, it doesn't just have to be Grandma Smith apples. Any kind of crisp apple that can hold its shape while cooked can be used. And I know it looks like a lot, but what happens as a pie bakes, the apples kind of fall into the pie, as in they kind of shrink, I dare say. Alright, now I have my oven preheated 425 degrees. What's going to happen is I am going to, once I finish putting the pie together, I'm going to bake it on 425 degrees for 20 minutes, and then we're going to reduce the heat to 350 degrees, and I'm talking about Fahrenheit. 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes. And what happens is, to test if your pie is done, you just want to use like a toothpick or something, dip it in the middle, and if you meet very little resistance, your pie is done, okay? After the allotted time. So you remember the syrup that we made? Just the syrup from the apples and the spices. I'm just going to drizzle it up over. It's kind of like caramel. So if you've ever eaten a caramel apple, you know that flavor. It's so delicious, and that's what we're adding in here in form of this reduced apple juices and spices. When I mean reduced, I mean we've made it nice and thick. It's not the original amount that we poured in, so it's gotten like the amount has reduced in whatever you're cooking. Okay, look at what I found. Isn't that cute? Cute cam and bacon. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dot the top with butter. This butter melts and add that richness to the pie as it bakes. And then I'm going to put this pie back into the refrigerator as I roll out the top crust, and I'll come back and show you how to crimp, okay? I just did not want to take out the top crust as I was doing this because I didn't want the butter in it to melt. So I'll finish doing this, I'll stick this in the refrigerator to chill, and then I'll roll out the top. I'll use the same technique I used to roll out the bottom crust, and then I'm going to cover it, and I'll come back and show you how to crimp it and prepare it to put it in the oven. So we'll be right back. Alright guys, I went ahead and rolled the top crust for this pie, and again to 1/8 of an inch in thickness. Now I went ahead and dusted off any excess flour using my trusty pastry brush here, and I just gently draped it over the pie. If you look down here, I'll show you what it is I did. So you see that? Underneath here is all that apple goodness and the butter, and this, make sure to also leave some overhang. See that? It's hanging over this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to tuck this up underneath the bottom crust. You see that? And to me, the most special part of a pie, it's gotta have to be the crust for me, guys. I love like having a lot of crust. You see what I'm doing? I'm just tucking it in there. Just tucking it in and rotating the the dish as you go. Now my dish is kind of slippery because all the butter and the pie crust on the silicone mat. So this is we're just sealing the pie. That way the juices of the apples in there do not splatter out as it bakes. Okay. And try and be as neat as you can. Just try your very best. You always want your food to look and taste, look good, pretty and taste good. So I'm very particular about the way my food looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently run my finger around the filling here to dip it down some, and then we can start crimping the crust. Oh boy, this thing is slippery. Okay, now there's plenty ways to crimp your crust. Okay, some people use the tines of a fork. Okay, they just use the tines, the little sharp parts of the fork, to press down along the edges. Some people make a scalloped edge where you use your two fingers. See this? Use your two fingers and then you push in with your thumb. Okay, I like that method. I also like the pinching method, and I'm gonna try that out today if this thing will sit still. So I just go around the edge of the pie, pinching out. You know what? Hold on a second. This is getting ridiculous. I'm gonna put this clean kitchen towel underneath there. That way it doesn't slip and slide because it's driving me crazy. Like a spatula said, keep calm and bake on. So I'm just pinching and I'm rotating. Now I'm gonna go back and deepen the pinches, okay, with time, but I'm gonna keep doing this. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take, once I'm done pinching around like this, I'm gonna take my knife and cut slits like here, like an X right in the top, another X here, and then I'm gonna cut like little vents. Now what this does is as the pie bakes, the apples will release some steam. So these vents will help the steam escape. That way it doesn't make your pie crust, what do you call it, soggy, okay? And also the leftover pie crust that I had, I went ahead and used a cookie cutter that's shaped like a maple leaf. You can use anything that you like. So this is what I use, and I dipped it in some flour, just that way it doesn't stick to the crust. And then I just I rolled out the leftover dough into, again, an eighth of an inch in thickness, and I use this to cut little shapes, and that's what you have here. And then with the back of my paring knife, I just put indentations in it to make it look like the veins of a leaf. You see that? So what I'm going to do, once I'm finished crimping all around this, I'm going to use egg wash, which is just a whole egg beaten with a tablespoon of water, and I'm going to use that to brush the pie, okay, the top as well as the edges, and then I'm going to sprinkle it with just regular granulated sugar. That'll give it a little bit of crunch once it's nice and done baking. And then I'm going to throw it in, I'm going to cover it with my protector for the pie crust, and I'm going to throw it in the oven again for 425 degrees for 20 minutes, and I'm going to reduce the heat to 350 degrees, and we're going to let it bake for 45 minutes. And then I'll be back with you to show you the finished item, okay? We'll see you back in a little bit. Welcome back. Our pie's been baking in the oven at 425 degrees for the first 20 minutes, and then we reduced the heat to 350 degrees, and we baked it for 45 additional minutes. And in the last 15 minutes of baking, I took that pie crust protector off the pie just to let the edges brown up evenly. And if you look down here, you'll see I went ahead and crimped. That means put that design on the edges of the pie. And then I also went ahead and cut, if you remember seeing those pieces of dough that I cut up, and that's them. I just went ahead and stuck them on there. What I did is I used my pastry brush. I mixed an egg and 1 tablespoon of water. That's called egg wash, and then I brushed it over the pie with my pastry brush, and then I sprinkled with some granulated sugar. So that's what we have here. And I remember I stopped when I'd already made the slits in the pie crust. And I let my pie cool on the cooling rack. For the past 15 minutes, it's been cooling down because I want to taste it and I don't want it to burn me. And I also have my vanilla ice cream on the side that I'm going to put over, oh, I cannot wait, over the pie. So let's cut this up and see what it looks like on the inside, okay? So I'm just using a, you hear that? Listen. Look at how flaky that is. Listen to that. You hear that? That's a sound of flakiness. Ooh. Right, that makes a mess. I'm just gonna put that's going into my plate. So I'm gonna try, and I sure hope it does not break in here, because I hate when that happens. And I still have the pie on. I still have the pie on the baking, the cooling rack here, just so it does not get soggy at the bottom. I'm gonna put that up over. That's some of the filling. Oh my God. I wish you guys could smell this. I'm not gonna be greedy. So I'm gonna take my vanilla ice cream. What I have here is a cup of water, hot water, and I put my ice cream scoop in there just so it can like have an easy time taking that ice cream. Ooh, look at that. Out of the container, and I'm just gonna put that up over. Now, that is just sin on a plate. Sin on a plate. And I make no apologies. I feel no guilt because I'm about to indulge, okay? So, still hot, see? I'm gonna start with the crust. I want you to hear that resounding, hear that? The crunch. I'm gonna take some of that ice cream, and as it melts all over that ice cream, it'll burn. I don't care. It's still hot because I just want to get a taste of it. Oh my God! And that crust. Look at this. You hear that? Crunch, crunch. And the apples, just enough sweetness, not too sweet. Delicious, delicious, delicious. One more bite. I'm sorry, y'all. Somebody's got to do it. That somebody's me. My God, the flavors, they hit your layers. You can taste that cinnamon in there, and the cardamom, and then the crust just kind of crumbles in your mouth as you eat it. So I'm gonna polish that plate off. I did say polish, and I'm gonna share the rest with my family. So thank you so much for joining me this time. I hope you come back again and join me as I take your taste buds on another culinary safari. Now this season I'm gonna focus a lot on baked goods because this is the time I bake a lot during the day. This time of the year I bake a lot, so I'm gonna keep coming back with new recipes for you. Some from Africa, some from all over the place. But thank you so much for joining me, and I love you guys. Bye-bye.